I'm Brock Kingsley, and welcome to One More Things, a podcast about art and culture and ideas. Wherever you are and whenever you are listening, thank you for tuning in. So I've been thinking about how we think about art, why we think about art, and what do we talk about when we talk about art. I think these questions are going to be a kind of through line for this program, something that we can keep returning to, and how these questions shift and change based on what kind of art we're talking about at any given moment. So as a way to start this podcast, we're going to have a brief discussion about a film about art, Michael Flanagan's Breaking the Code, an autobiographical documentary on the artist Vernon Fisher. Conversations around art too often devolve into well-worn tropes, some variation of what does this mean or what is the artist trying to say. Worse still is the question about usefulness of art, the constant need to prod art and artists to justify themselves. What is any of this good for? What is it helping? These are intellectually silly questions, and I'm thankful that, for the most part, Breaking the Code sidesteps them. Instead, filmmaker Flanagan provides us with a loving portrait of the man behind the works. While Flanagan is not ignorant of these questions of usefulness, he allows Fisher to be front and center, to talk about his process, his life and experiences, and how they interact to produce beautiful works that provide, endless engagement. Not long ago, I was able to attend a screening of Breaking the Code at the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth. While I was somewhat familiar with Fisher's works, especially the blackboard paintings and some of the early Target paintings, I didn't realize he was from and lived and worked in Fort Worth. I'm, to be honest, a reluctant denizen of the same place, and my reluctance and ignorance say more about me than they do the actual city. I was one of the only ones at the screening to not know about Fisher's background. Conversations before and during the film pointed this out. One man said he was a high school classmate of Fisher's, and during the screening would comment and point people out that he recognized. The occasion for story was much by happenstance. While in grad school working towards an MFA in documentary filmmaking, Flanagan attended a small retrospective of Fisher's work. Words and pictures brought together Fisher's painting and sculptures from the 1980s to the then present day. Flanagan was blown away and started a 3-year process that would culminate in Breaking the Code. And this film was gorgeous. The composition, lighting, color coding, the editing to piece together a narrative structure. Breaking the Code started as Flanagan's thesis film, but after receiving funding in 2021, moved to feature length. At first, Fisher was reluctant to participate, but had no problem with Flanagan pursuing the film. And once Flanagan got started, and Fisher could see the work he was doing, the direction he was going, he was on board. And for a first film, Breaking the Code is slick, in a good way. It's well constructed and accomplished, and it marks Flanagan, at least in my opinion, as a filmmaker to keep an eye on. Okay, a bit of a bio on Fisher. Vernon Fisher was a multimedia artist born in 1943 in Fort Worth, Texas. He earned a BA in English Literature from Hardin Simmons University in 1967, and an MFA from the University of Illinois at Urbana, Champaign in 1969. He moved back to Texas and taught at Austin College and later at the University of North Texas. It's not hard to see the influence artists like Ed Ruscha and John Baldessari had on Fisher. Best known for his paintings that resembled chalk on a school blackboard, Fisher created visual narratives combining language and images, often with incongruous elements added. Let's take, for example, the work Private Africa from 1995. This is made of disparate images and styles, painted on blackboard slating. Its size is nearly 8 feet by 8 feet. The base of the painting is a map of Central Africa after it had been carved up post-Treaty of Versailles in 1917. The names of places and rivers are written in white, and lines of latitude and longitude form a grid over the painting. Look closely, you'll see various scribbles of words and geometric equations that have been wiped away, leaving erasure marks like you'd find on a chalkboard. In the center left of the painting is a photorealistic depiction of a parachutist, let's say paratrooper. Next to it are fragile, delicate white lines that form a waterfall that splits the work vertically. The color palette is sparse and cool. The flatness of the map is in contrast to the feeling of movement in the waterfall and 3D reality of the paratrooper. Fisher maintained an interest in literature throughout his life, and his works would continue to contain literary tropes and techniques. Because of this, his works provoke reading as much as they do seeing. First you see, then you read. We use metaphors to better understand the world around us, to give it shape and meaning. Fisher uses metonymy to move from one image to another. Aspects of each image overlap. The downward trajectory of the paratrooper mirrors the vertical motion of the waterfall. The waterfall then influences the inclusion of a watermill painted in the background. This loose pattern helps to build the complexity of the overall image. Metaphors, the best of them, force us to reconsider our relationship to objects, people, and the world around us. We use our imagination to make connections. With Private Africa, Fisher uses a map to bring up the idea of colonial presence, a presence still very much active in our society. He evokes the theory of place and our place in the world, how we navigate borders both within and without. Fisher had over 80 solo exhibitions during his lifetime. His work is in the permanent collections of over 40 museums. Fisher died shortly before this film premiered in 2023, but he was able to see a near final cut. Something Breaking the Code manages to convey is the idea that one not need live in a perceived art mecca to be creative and successful. The work is the work, and it can be made wherever you happen to find yourself. If life is just material, well, life is happening all around you, whether you're in New York, LA, Paris, or Fort Worth, and whether you like it or not. In the film, Michael Opping, former chief curator at the Modern, comments there are any number of really great regional artists that don't leave town. Maybe Fisher always understood that. Or maybe it was hearing a professor or mentor telling him it was okay to look inward. Fisher started his academic and by extension, artistic career as a lit major. In the film, he references T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, a poem that follows the musings of its speaker in a stream of consciousness mode. Prufrock is a poem of anguish, a poem whose speaker epitomizes the frustrations and inertia of the modern man. The poem is also a lament. Prufrock, the speaker, bemoans lost opportunities, physical and intellectual, read creative, stagnation. Prufrock is haunted by an overwhelming question that he's scared to ask for fear of rejection. What happens when you put yourself out there, for whatever reason, and are roundly ignored? But to recognize something of oneself in this poem, the way Fisher did, is in fact to rail against Prufrock and his stagnation, to refuse his fate. Fisher was going to do the work no matter where he was, and he wasn't going to care if you thought it useful or not, or if your interpretation of the work aligned with his own. Flanagan, as a filmmaker, understands this, and he is confident and clear in his vision. He understands how to get out of the way, that his subject holds our attention as much as he holds the center of the film. More than that, Flanagan, too, understands how to seemingly get the best from Fisher. Watching Breaking the Code, I imagine Flanagan just let him talk, just let him hold the space until he had said all he had to say. I stopped into the Modern to look again at a print of Fisher's hanging on the wall. This museum, over the years, has become a kind of safe harbor for me. Institutions like museums at their best, and their most open and accessible, can be sanctuaries. Places not just to look, but to sit and think. Use our imaginations as we continue to look for connections in a world that is always changing, and oftentimes doesn't care about us at all. That's all I've got for today. Next time, we'll take a look at Brian Allen Carr's novel, Bad Foundations. Until then, take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you soon.